Hey guys, this is Mike
And Joe.
from Deep Wood Force of Will
And the Conqueror community.
and the Conqueror Committee. That's right. Joey and I are part of the five members. Yeah, five members of the new Conqueror Committee, and we are starting the format from its roots.
Yeah, Conqueror existed previously as to be like, hey, let's make Wanderer a functional format again after there wasn't a real ban list for a while. And then we kind of had to branch off and do our own thing because the Wanderer ban list committee came out and had a little bit more, I don't know, credentials
Yeah.
to be making a ban list. So we did what we had to do. Now we feel like there's a need to have Conqueror again. So we're back.
Yeah. So far, recently, the Wanderer Bandlist Committee has been working their best to try and keep up with the power creep of Force of Will, and we decided that since there was this kind of niche between where people want to play like turn 3 power combos in Wanderer right now, Conqueror should be like a home for anybody looking to play a little more of like a tempo, value-oriented game. Kind of slow things down and start from scratch, and we're going to try and make that happen.
Well, let's just hop right into it then. Here's our ban list.
Yep. This is starting for May 23rd. This is the current Force of Will ban list. You can find this on the Force of Will TCG website. You'll notice a couple of things missing from here, and we'll be going over those shortly, but just as a reminder, Pricia, Demonic Dead, Gretel, Griffin, Pumpkin Witch, Law of Silence, Whispers from the Abyss, Speaker of the Eternal Night, Severing Winds, Play Dead, the Cheshire Cat's Assistance, True Blade of Spirits, Fair Spell, Otherworld Dreams, Lumia, Apollo, Change the World, Laevateinn, and Horn of Sacred Beasts are all still banned in this format.
And for good reason.
Whew, that was a lot. That was a breath.
Yeah, we didn't see any good reason to bring these things back and at least stick within our pillars for how we want to keep Conqueror as a format. So
Yep.
we can go on to Guinevere.
Correctamundo.
She is our first unban. She was originally unbanned by Conqueror, and then also picked up as a unbanned by the Wanderer ban list committee. And we're gonna go along that same round, unban her again.
Yep. Guinevere originally got banned due to her kind of not fitting into the Fire Will's color pie, essentially, if you want to call it that. She was just a very efficient resonator. Being able to sack herself off at a quick cast speed and being able to draw 2 and discard was basically making her a 2-for-1 in a sense. But with a couple of other cards such as Dark Alice and Gatekeeper of Velsivaria recently coming out, she's been power crept beyond belief. These cards are much faster, do a similar job to what she does. So
Yeah, they're both very powerful cards. Mainly Gatekeeper's Velsivaria shows that there is definitely a place in red for card draw, especially very fast and strong card draw.
Yep, exactly. And while Guinevere may be repeatable if you have multiple things to sack to her, it's still a once per turn thing. You're not going to be getting like this crazy amount of value out of her. So with those factors in mind, we decided that it would be safe to bring her back. Nothing too crazy about her right now.
Yep, pretty safe there. Next up is Telefairy Tale.
This is definitely one of the more interesting ones that was originally brought back by the WBC. I don't believe the Conqueror Committee brought this back originally.
Yeah, we were a little bit hesitant on it.
But with everything we've seen recently, and with the way that both Wanderer and our new Conqueror format have been going, it seems that there have been very many answers to turn 3 large fairy tales being just kind of cheated out of the deck.
And speaking of those fairy tales, we have Skyscraper Giant still, which is still quite a threat compared to most of the other things. But without a card that we're going to talk about later, the card isn't as oppressive as it was originally banned for.
Yep. There's also a lot of non-targeting removal. There's a lot of removal that's on resonators already. Skyscraper Giant only comes with Barrier Chant. So he's definitely not too difficult to get rid of. He's sticky for sure, but nothing like completely overbearing. And next to him, we've also got Eternal Boy Peter Pan, who's kind of the poster child for things that we can bring out that will trigger their enter abilities, as Telefairy Tale says. Meaning that a Peter Pan brought out using Telefairy Tale will trigger its ability to search your deck for a Fairy Tale Resonator with cost 1 twice. And so, essentially they'll just give you 2 extra bodies from deck, but again, it's somewhat balanced by the fact that you have to be playing Grimm the Fairy Tale Prince in order to get that trigger.
And also you have to manually draw the tell a fairy tale for the most part. It's kind of hard to search it.
Exactly. It's a 3-mana card that isn't really game ending, but it'll put you ahead on tempo, and I think that's fine for the 3-cost slot.
Alright. And now to talk about our bans. So those were their 2 unbans. Here's Captain Hook, who's a ban. When this card enters your field, choose one. Put 2 target magic stones, special magic stones, on top of their owner's magic stone deck, and then why'd you do it, Hook? you don't really need the other part, but the other part's still pretty good. It's just once we got Fairy Tale support that let us, cheat in Hooks on turn 2, that's when it really got oppressive, because Force of Will decks, unfortunately, are very centered around having special magic stones that do a lot, doing their color fixing, doing whatever they need to do. We don't usually see decks with basic stones.
Yep, and if we do, they're kind of like fringe meta decks, so Hook is very much like the thing that'll spike the meta, and we've seen him do that plenty of times. He's actually the reason that Fairy Tale got banned in the first place.
Exactly.
Fairy Tale was on the very first Wanderer ban list after Hook was like, hey guys, I'm here too now. And then they're like, oh, yeah, he's here too now, bye.
Could you imagine double triggering Hook with the Fairy Tale? Oh my god.
Disgusting. But
let's move on.
Well, other than that, I also wanted to just talk about Force of the Lost Misty Woods. Of course, the card that can literally put Captain Hook from your grave into the board at quick cast speed and helps you search for him. We really don't need to say much about it. That's just absolutely disgusting. And also, I see that, Joey, you put here a pile of 10 face-down cards. What's that?
That's my Magic Stone deck, Mike.
Ah, yes.
I bounced all my stones.
That's true. That is what Hook does. So, for these reasons, as you can tell, Hook deserves the banning at this point. So
next up is Forest Meditation. It's one of the more powerful rune cards available right now. We're doing some other edits to Divinity and runes, but this one specifically leaves kind of a sour spot on how we want to guide the meta.
Yep, exactly. So again, for all of you who haven't had to think about this card in a while, you get to put target Resonator from your grave into your hand, or put 2 magic stones from your graveyard into the field, or draw a card, and you can choose up to 2 of those. And for all intents and purposes, going to the next slide, Spirit Stone meant that if you tap both your Spirit Stones down to produce wind, sack them both to draw a card, activate Force Meditation, bring them both back, untapped, and then you draw 1 more card. So essentially, for 3 Divinity, you get 3 cards at no actual cost to you.
Yep, and it, of course, also triggers Torrent.
Yep, and that was one of the reasons
that mechanic.
Yep, and that's one of the reasons that Hanzo Myths was one of those really, really big decks while Forest Meditation was around. Just one of the most disgustingly value-oriented mid-range decks we've ever seen, and not even mid-range decks. It also enabled combos, but which became a little bit harder when you had a mono Windstone. But that's why Spirit Stone is staying and why Forest Meditation is out.
Yep. Spinning Mitts is definitely a great card, but we'll see how that goes without the Divinity changes.
Yep. So, moving on.
It's Mike's favorite card.
Hello, Kaguya, Sealed God of the Moon. How are you?
It's in layman's terms, 3-drop, quick cast, 7/7, cancel something. You can make it cost less if you have Rune 2. And then it has a win condition. That's additional card text.
I thought the win condition was the cancel and then put a 7/7 on board, Joey. What do you mean it has additional card text?
I don't know. This card's ridiculous.
Yep. Actually, one of the most disgusting cards I think we've ever seen in this game's history. Kaguya was definitely way more powerful when Explore the Unknown was able to go into her. And we'll talk a little bit more detail about that later on in the video. But even so, even as a 3-cost card, being able to just cancel target spell, just a pure Omni cancel on a body. It doesn't matter how many of these cards you have in hand at the beginning of the game. If you have multiples of them, you're probably in a winning situation.
Regardless of what your opponent plays, which is kind of crazy.
Yep. Basically, you're just bundling Seal of Wind and Light with any 7/7 body for 3 will, and then you just kind of factor them all together as That's
In case you
Kaguya.
didn't, all you have to do is swing 6 times the 7/7 to win a game.
Yep. And if your opponent
And-
can't play cards, it's very easy to swing 7 times. Or
Yeah.
6 times. Yeah.
So don't be fooled that 7/7s can't be win conditions, because they can.
They definitely can. So, for all the most obvious reasons, I think this is the least amount of reasoning we've had to say. Kaguya is 100% banned.
Oh boy, another favorite.
Oh! What's up, Umer?
So we got the 7-cost at-Tawil, the world's greatest cheat card / reanimator card / whatever you want to do with him. He's a 1-card OTK, as long as your deck's ready to do it.
Yep, in multiple different fashions. So obviously when he enters the board, search your deck for any non-chance with cost 1, up to 1 with cost 2, and up to 1 with cost 3, and just toss them into your field.
So how bad could that possibly be?
Oh, really bad!
Infinite damage, I'm decked out, and my opponent just, like, stole my life.
Yep. Umer is just an issue for Conqueror format for just a multitude of reasons. It's very easy to get him out if he hits the board and is not either bounced back to the hand or had his enter ability cancelled. He will run away with the game. It doesn't even matter if you kill him, because he'll just bring out a Book of Ibon with his total cost 3 addition grab.
Yep, and re-grab himself, because why not?
Yep, and not only that, obviously we have the Book of Ibon there, but we also have not only the multiple ways that he is able to OTK just with copies of himself, with cards like Bailey the Charlatan, Shadow of Lapis, all of that, classic stuff that happened when he was first revealed, but you can also just mill your opponent out by infinitely playing Rachel the Ancient Library Researcher.
Yep, and before anyone says, oh, why don't you just ban Heroic Epic or Book of Ibon, those types of cards that help you cheat in Umer, well, unfortunately, there's like 14 different ways to like get Umer into play, and then there's also like 14 different ways that Umer can do combos.
Yep.
So
I know that originally Conqueror had banned Failey the Charlatan on its first ever ban list to try and let Umer stay.
Artist, but yes.
Yeah, sorry. I get the Failey's confused. They're both 3-drops. But unfortunately, that actually doesn't solve anything because of Leaves of Yggdrasil being able to just attach himself to Umer, sack Umer to the sack outlet, bring it back, and then just continue the combo from there. There's really no plausible way to figure out how to stop the Umer combo from happening without actually hitting him itself.
Yeah, it's very messy, unfortunately.
Yep. So, with this in mind, obviously we don't think that combos shouldn't exist, but for the sake of what we're doing, Conqueror definitely is no home for Umer. If you want to play Umer, Wander format's just littered with them, so it's fine.
Specifically, we don't want decks that are like, if my opponent doesn't have this specific card by turn 3, I lost the game. Well,
Yep.
I win the game, because they don't have it.
Right.
And that's not okay. Anyway,
Okay.
speaking of the exact opposite problem,
Yep. There's Perfect Loki, alright.
Perfect Loki, the queen king thing of attrition.
Yep.
Blue-black, I don't need to talk about the stats, you don't care about that. It's quick cast final battle.
Yep.
So all you have to do is just get things in your graveyard, and then you can deal a solid minus X100 defense to your opponent's board based on the number of cards in there.
And being able to do it at a quick cast speed means that you can just, before your opponent starts their turn, before they untap, you just play the Perfect Loki, neg their entire board for the turn, and anything they play just dies. So
Yeah, we love aura abilities.
Yep. There's a reason
And if
that
that wasn't enough to make it a broken card, well, we also have a insanely strong win condition where you basically turn your J ruler into Perfect Loki. You still get the enter effect. You also get to mill the top 10 cards of your deck, add one of those those milled cards to your hand, and you could use Necronomicon once per turn.
but without the removing the cards from the game after they leave. So basically you just get infinite grave recursion at 0 cost to yourself.
There's literally everything in this card. Luckily, we don't have to talk about giants, but that would also be a really bad thing to have Perfect Loki do.
Yeah, exactly. We'll go over that later as well, but again, as we mentioned, final battle on a quick cast body that also gets bigger as your grave goes on, and then match it up with Necronomicon, which has multiple very strict conditions to using it. And you just get a ridiculous card on every level. It's anti-tempo, it's anti-control. It's just nothing can stand up to not only its ability to turn a board into a puddle of nothing, but also its ability to just lock out the game going into the late game, and there's nothing that can out attrition it. So, for those reasons, Perfect Loki is also out.
This one's a little bit more of an interesting one, though. Moving on, we have the Kingdom of Diversity Light Palace. Again, we're sticking to the theme of either combo or just like board floody type things should not be occurring that wind up killing you randomly on turn 2 or 3.
Yep.
If you don't know what it does, Resonators you control gain +1/+1 for each different race among all Resonators you control. Resonators you control gain keywords based on if you have a J ruler with those abilities.
Yep. So, the card looks pretty innocuous at first until you start reading into the big facets of what exactly that entails.
Yeah. The main problem is Alice Zeus Incarnate, which got printed in DBV. So the card says that you can gain all races in all zones, which is over 250 currently.
So,
just playing a 3-drop in combination with your 2-drop edition gives your board a plus 250k semi-permanent buff.
Which is very not okay, obviously.
Yeah, considering you only have 4k life usually.
Yeah, I would assume so, yeah. And
that's the main issue with it, is just that combo can be a little bit oppressive and volatile and unfun. And then on top of that, there is the like swarmy decks like that you lowly swoop Beard Bug and a bunch of little idiots to try and deal massive damage and have uninteractable boards.
Yep. We saw a while back, even in New Frontiers, we were seeing a lot of, Witch Palace decks that just kind of dominated and steamrolled a lot of people. We could see something similar pop up later. Obviously, it's not the main problem with the card. The main problem is definitely Alice, and out of the two, we wanted to keep Alice because of her natural synergies in the format, because of how many race-specific synergies there are in Wanderer. She's a much more interesting card than Light Palace, and I think that she more represents what we want to be doing with the format currently.
Yep, because she does have the other part of her text that makes her very interesting with certain decks.
Yep, and she's got the pay 5 of every color to remove an entity from the game, which is really, really weird and really interesting.
Yeah. So we had to choose one of them in order to keep the pillars of what we think Conqueror should be in line, and Light Palace was the one that had to go between the two of them.
Yep. Pretty self-explanatory.
Next up is Machine Lab of Leginus. Hey, it's another 2-drop edition that winds up causing infinite damage.
Who knew?
Machine Lab will let you put a target machine with total cost 2 or less from your graveyard into the field. It itself is a 2-drop machine. That's where the problem stems from.
Yep.
Specifically in combination with Guinevere, the Mobility Queen.
Yes, sir, because Guinevere has the ability to banish machine to give herself 2 +1/+1 counters, and when you play a lab with a lab engrave, you target the lab engrave, Guinevere will sack the first one, gain the counters, the first one will come back, the one from grave will come into the play, enter triggers, target the thing in the grave, Gwen sacks it, and then endless loop.
Yeah, this wasn't a problem when it was first printed, but we had the enter errata such that things coming from not the hand will trigger. So That's when that first started, and then we got Guinevere. We had to make a choice between whether it was Guinevere or Lab. We're not 100% sure which one should stay, but for now we're going to decide on Lab and then maybe make some decisions later.
Yeah, right now, I think our main focus was that Guinevere is very much a pillar of the identity of blue machines as they are right now. She's a damage option later in the game. She turns big boards into big damage on her own, which obviously we know that we kind of want to avoid swarmy boards, but the way that she does it is more of like a risk-reward factor, and I think that's what a lot of players really enjoy about her.
Yeah.
Lab is really cool just because it's a little bit of recursion, and it can recur things like Maribel Type 0, as we see here, who's definitely one of the strongest of the regalia we've seen coming out in the Alice Origin series.
Yep.
But for right now, we think that Lab is the one that should remain off. It could change in the future if we want to experiment a little bit, but for right now, I think we've settled on this change. And
lastly, we have Yggdrasil Malefic Verdant Tree. So no one has ever said that they've had a good time playing against Dark Tree. Let's just be frank here. The main issue currently is that you can't play. The person that's playing Dark Tree doesn't lose the game when they're by normal means. They have to be decked out basically, or burned out by specific means. That usually can't happen unless you have a specific deck.
Yep. The fact that it also prevents players from gaining life shuts out an entire archetype essentially of play. Like there are decks that want to go above on life, and Tree literally just says that cannot happen, which is another just kind of unfun interaction that you have with him.
Yeah, it took a while for Tree to get its roots. But eventually we started getting printed cards like Reincarnation of the Soul and Allosaurus, the Invader of God's City, that let him go infinite without having to worry about running out of, like, having his answers be removed by, like, a burn spell, like a lightning strike, such as that, where you banish out, like, their, Miracle Millennia Medicine they would use to play.
Yeah, exactly. The big thing is that Reincarnation of the Soul, being a quick cast spirit magic that grabs things from removed and puts them back into the deck, is a really big deal for Yggdrasil, because you can let your opponent just hit you all they want. You go down to 0 cards in deck. Before you draw, play Reincarnation, get 3 things, draw a card, and then you just don't lose the game. And as long as you can keep that juggling act going, you just infinitely play the game. Which is...
On the other side, you have Allosaurus, who does basically the same exact thing, because he is a 0 cost, reveal it from your hand and put it on top of your deck. So you can't even, like, get rid of him at all.
Yep.
So, because, like, literally as they go into their draw phase, you put it on top of your deck and you do whatever you need to do. It's... Both these cards just do exactly the same thing.
Yep. Allosaurus and Reincarnation of the Soul are on their own very interesting cards, and we've seen them used in a few other decks aside from Yggdrasil, but they are just completely broken when factoring him in. And
on top of that, we also received a lot of, like, turbo support in AO3 for Tree, so one of Tree's weaknesses is having a kind of whack early game. So it getting remedied by the Angel of Velsivaria that we saw earlier.
Yeah, the Gatekeeper.
It's gonna do a lot for... Yeah, Gatekeeper Velsivaria will do a lot for making sure that he has no weaknesses as a deck, and that's not okay.
Yep. And also in the late game, the Gatekeeper just becomes like a 4,000 attack behemoth.
Yeah, along with your free 10/10s, like, what? Who cares?
Yeah, just
gotta hit him in the face really, really hard.
Yeah, just play the game, hit him real bad.
Well, you can't die.
So, with all those things in mind, and with Tree's pretty much infinite attrition, and the fact that if your deck is not specifically tech to beat him, there's just no way around him, we decided that it was definitely time for him to go. Still playable in Wanderer format, though, if you enjoy just playing with yourself for like 20 minutes.
Right. Some people like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're going to go into CR changes. I'm going to preface before we go into detail that none of the original Conqueror things are in effect, except for the things that we're listing here. So there's no erratas, there's no complex bans, nothing like that currently.
Yep, we are trying to go right from the roots of the original Wanderer format and just kind of supplement it from there and just kind of fix things up.
Well, without further ado, we have our first change, which is Energize. This is kind of what Conqueror was known for when it first came out.
Yep.
If a ruler does not have Energize, it gains after deciding the first player. If you are not the first player, you will start with a wool coin token without any types in your item area with... That's basically Energize's key. What that means is a keyword. Banish does produce a 1 will of your ruler's attribute or of any attribute cost in its judgment. That's slightly different from how the Wanderer Banlist Committee made theirs and how Conqueror originally made theirs. This way we still keep J rulers unknown, as they're not supposed to be known knowledge off the start of the game, and we also will give a little bit more leeway to certain rulers with their Energize.
Yep, the main ones we had in mind were rulers such as like Pandora, the girl of the box, who's a void cost card, and then she has light and darkness in her judgment. Instead
and
of
J ruler sides.
Exactly. So we want to keep that hidden, but we also want to make sure that she's able to, not just be a void one Energize. So she's able to produce either light or darkness based on this change.
We also made an edit to 1119.3a. which is if that ruler has no attribute nor any attribute costs in its judgment, that ruler produces 1 for its energize. These are adds, not adits, but
Yeah.
that's just a sub archetype. Anyway, to showcase what we mean by these tags, we have Puss in Boots here. Originally does not have energized, now produces green.
Yep. Next up, we have Snow White, who is a fire attribute fire attribute ruler, who in the WBC would be producing only red, but because she has light in her judgment cost as well, she produces both either light or fire.
Definitely a good change. And then we have Machina, who doesn't have energized, but can energize for 1 because he is a void ruler.
Yep, that energized one was taken directly from Aramaki, the Ghost in the Shell ruler, so for anything involving void attribute energize, please see that card for reference.
Nice.
Then we got the rune deck change.
This is the biggest thing that's being changed. So the rune deck change for Conqueror when in its late thing was kind of a mess. We're redoing it. Mike will go over where our new changes are.
Yep, so previously this was an edit to 402.6, which is an actual rule in the CR. It's originally said a rune deck is a pile of cards containing only rune cards. We have supplemented this by adding non-chant rune cards. What that means is that you can no longer play chant/rune cards in your rune deck.
This also applies to any of the sub-types of rune that would be in your rune deck.
Right, such as chant/master rune.
Next up, we also edited 402.8, which would have referenced between the main deck, extra deck, and rune deck, you may have up to 4 copies of a card. We removed the rune deck part because if you can't have chant runes in your rune deck, it wouldn't be referencing those types of cards. So just main deck and extra deck meaning your side deck and whatnot.
Yep, and then the last bit we removed, just kind of like housekeeping on this, is 711.4, which said, when playing a chant/rune card from the rune area, follow these rules, referencing all of the rules on CR 711.
Yep.
So with that gone, we don't have to worry about, playing chant runes from the rune area if they are no longer allowed there.
So we'll go into a little bit of the implications of this just to help some people along in how this format works. So here we have a showcase of 2 different rune decks from a Lucifer ruler. One of them is okay, the other one is not as okay.
Yep.
First one has Black Rosario, Demon Division, Jet Black Wings, Undeath, Sword of Lament. It is a 12 divinity rune deck.
Yep.
But we'll go over that you can have a 10 divinity rune deck despite these changes. The second Lucifer has a little bit more of a wacky rune deck. He's got Demon Division, Power of Immortality. Power of Immortality is not okay because it's a chant rune. Soul Prison's not okay because it's a chant master rune. Explore the Unknown, chant rune again, can't play it. And then it also has Maintenance, which is a blue rune that still doesn't fit within the context of our rule changes, so it cannot be played by Lucifer.
Yep, exactly. So this is just to kind of illustrate, what's legal, what's not legal, and basically it restricts the rune deck down to a small number, but it also means that you still have some amount of hidden information from your opponent. It's still, just like 5 slottable, just like pseudo gods arts, if you want to call them that at this point, instead of just being whatever spells you want to play. Because previously, rune decks were often used to just make it so that the divinity decks were way more consistent than other decks in the format. It was just very unintuitive sometimes.
It was basically just this huge consistency engine of 5 seemingly useless cards, where they didn't do much besides just get your hand to how you want it to be.
Yep. And also some cards such as Power of Immortality and Explore the Unknown are, decent cards when played outside of the rune deck, but in the rune deck are just, with the discount factored in, are incredibly powerful, like unbelievably powerful.
Explore the Unknown being able to trigger Torrens and such, but that's not a thing. But Mike, what if I wanted to play a card that needs rune 5? How do I reach that?
Well, Joey, I'm glad you asked, because I have a slide about it. So, the good news behind this rune deck change is that every single ruler has 5 runes specific to them that add up to Divinity 10. Since there are no Divinity 1 runes, it was initially kind of an issue when we were figuring out exactly how it works, but with each of these 5 combinations, you can get to rune 5 when you're playing something like, say, Chimimi, and you're trying to get Tiger Me to have rune 5 to summon your other 3 Beast Warriors from the deck. You do have the capability of doing that with the combination of Fuma Shuriken, Rapid Downstream, Rapid Fire Me, Whirlwind Technique, and in the Chimimi case, Sealing Scroll will be replaced with Elephant Rush.
So that works out really well. It's a pretty, I don't know, it's a very easy way to make it so that you can get through anything that you need to do. Ophiel is another card that required rune 5, and that's possible because you have things like Odin's Judgment and Turntail and all those fun cards.
Yep. We don't guarantee that they're good cards, and there's a little bit of a price to being able to get to rune 5 at a good pace, but honestly I think that's a very skill testing bit of things to work around, if that's the right word I'm thinking of.
As opposed to Divinity being this perfect consistency engine to say, hey, I want to play a ruler and I want these cards in my deck to be the best cards in my deck, so I should be playing this, I should be playing these runes. Instead you have to be like, well, do I really need these runes in order to make my deck better?
Yep, and if also...
I think that's what we kind of wanted.
Exactly, and also if you want to play Divinity 3 runes, when you flip that up, you know that you're not going to be able to use all 5 of your runes, because the first Divinity 3 will put you to Divinity 11 if you want to go through all 5 of them. So there's a little bit of a, do I need to play this now? Can I afford to play this? There's extra layers of deck building, there's extra layers of thought when playing a Divinity deck with more than 10 Divinity, so it's a very nice little quality of life thing that I think will go a long way in helping to balance out the format.
And we still think that Divinity is playable. It may not be top tier meta as it is in Wanderer, but we think that there is a place for it. You just have to find the right way.
Exactly. And we'll leave that up to you guys to figure out, because we would really, really want to see what everyone comes up with these new changes. Because this is very much a new game compared to how the game was played earlier.
And with that, I think we've wrapped up everything that we've changed for Conqueror. It's actually not a big change log.
Yeah, except for one last thing. I'm sure a lot of you know this. Back when I was on the ARG team, we were hyping up the most powerful card in New Frontiers, Arcana of War. Now, I know what you're thinking, but Mike, with these changes to the rune deck, Arcana of War can't play runes, because it could only play chant runes because it didn't have an attribute. And that's correct. This was actually a secret nerf to Arcana of War. May he rest in peace. Everybody please press F to pay respects.
But for the ARG team, I hope they're very happy that we finally reined in Arcana of War from ruining the meta for the past 3 years. It's been a long way coming, but we finally had to put the god to rest.
Yep. May he rest in peace. Amen. And with that, thank you all for watching. This is very exciting for us to unveil. I'm very excited to see how the format shapes out. I'm very excited to see what crazy decks you guys come up with. And I'm very excited for somebody to break the format so we can go back to the drawing board and make more bans.
There won't be any tournaments for the time being until OLS comes around, but we will definitely have that in OLS soon. So get your brews ready. Be prepped for a new season. And what Conqueror will bring for you. Yep,
we're very excited for this. Joey and I have been talking about these changes for a while now, and it's so nice to be able to finally put them out there. It's so nice to find a home for them, essentially.
Yep. Well, I think that's all we can do for today. This has been Deep Wood with Joe.
And Mike.
We're doing it backwards this time.
Yeah, we tricked you all. Peace out, guys.
Peace out.